come on, make a move. Everybody say it, make a move. I don't believe in conspiracy theories, so please bear with me. This is not one of them. In January of this year, the Chinese Communist Party purposely unleashed a contagion that within months would infect the entire globe. Some countries would prove particularly vulnerable while others were more resilient, but the damage done would dwarf any outbreak since the 1918 Spanish flu, which is generally considered the worst disease of the past century. This contagion was acquired willingly and even enthusiastically by most of our leaders who seemed intent on outdoing each other by getting even more of it. It was purposely imposed on our children, by our school systems, and even now, almost no one seems to realize that this contagion is a bad thing at all. Worldwide human mortality from COVID-19 is somewhere between the Hong Kong flu of 1968 and the swine flu of 2009. For example, the current mortality rate for COVID is about 0.0001, about twice as high as the swine flu, but it would need to be about 7 times higher, 0.0007, to match the Hong Kong flu. Now, as with any epidemic, it has hit some countries harder than others. In the US, for example, COVID-19 mortality is estimated to be about the same as it was for the Hong Kong flu. In many countries, it is much, much lower. But all these numbers are dwarfed by the very deadly Spanish flu with a worldwide mortality rate of about 2%. That's about 1 out of every 50 humans on Earth killed by the Spanish flu. Very, very serious. COVID-19, around 1 in 9,000. 1 in 9,000. Oh, I can hear it now. Michael, all those people, you don't care about all those people. Well, first of all, technically I am a boomer myself and therefore in the danger zone. Anybody seen Archer? Anybody? Of course I care. COVID is a terrible disease and it has caused pain and suffering all over the world. We were right to take precautions against it. The problem is, in our frenzy, and that's what it's been, a frenzy to do something, or in this case, more like do anything, we have made things much, much worse. Living on this beautiful planet is a gift, but it is not without its challenges. At this point in our evolution, there is no magical door that we can walk through that gets us through things like this unscathed. It just doesn't exist. Let me ask you something. Does it make sense that we shut down the economy of the entire world and that the only thing that happened is that we lost some money? Most of us have seen health statistics showing that things like stress, lack of exercise, neglecting regular doctor's visits, unemployment, increased drug use, and poverty cause humans to live shorter, unhealthier, unhappier lives. Does it make sense that the lockdowns didn't cause these things because our hearts were in the right place? Yes, William, I know you have something to say about this. We'll get to you in a couple of weeks, okay? Very early on, the Chinese provided us with all the information we needed to get this right, and this consisted of one irrefutable fact. This disease is not a serious threat to the great majority of the human population. How in heaven's name did that fact turn into a worldwide economic lockdown? Well, ask yourselves. If China had used voluntary social distancing instead of lockdowns, what would the rest of the world have done? Probably not this. Now, don't blame China. I don't. China is at its core a totalitarian society. This approach, or some version of it, that's the way they approach everything. Now, we cover the advisability of this approach in other segments. But we should have known better, because we know, although some of us still refuse to accept, that commerce is life, and life is commerce. You cannot separate them. They are two words for the same thing. So what happens when you shut down commerce for Homo sapiens? Well, here are a few things that happened. In the United States alone, 40 million people lost their jobs due to the COVID lockdowns. Unemployment shot up from about 3.5% to nearly 15%. Care to hazard a guess on unemployment figures for the Hong Kong flu? which at this point was about 7 times worse than COVID. Let that sink in for a minute. It's estimated that 1.6 billion workers in the informal sector worldwide suffered what this publication calls massive damage to their ability to earn a living from the COVID lockdowns. Now, there's no formal tally of worldwide unemployment, but it seems very likely that at least 800 million of the 3 billion people in the global workforce suffered unemployment or other major disruption of their livelihood due to the lockdowns. There is a very well-established connection between unemployment and premature death. This study followed 30,000 people, 30,000, so big data set, who were employed and those who were not. 10 to 17 years later, the unemployed had a 2.5% greater chance of being dead than those who were employed. In 800 million people, that's 20 million deaths. 20 million deaths. 1 million of these just in the United States, and that's just unemployment. What else happened? Doctors stopped seeing patients. 150,000 Americans every month, not every year, every month, are diagnosed with cancer through routine inspections. Many, many more worldwide, and many are treated successfully because they've been treated early. Screening stopped completely for months. What will happen to those people? In the developed world, gyms closed. 60 million Americans, just Americans, had their exercise routines disrupted. Some of them will never go back. There's a well-established connection between regular exercise and longer life. People who exercise live on average 3 years longer than those who don't. Who is counting all those lost years? There are many, many other examples. The consequences are dire for the countries who have moved further up along the economic curve. For those in earlier stages of economic development, they are catastrophic. In these areas, the ability to earn a living means just that, the difference between life and death. I find it ironic that those of us who say we are all in this together, we're also saying it was a good thing to impose these consequences on those who can least afford it. Because you see, closing down the economy of the entire world won't hurt anyone and will result in a much better economy. And having accomplished this, we're also the first ones to say that the best way to recover from the mostly self-inflicted damage from COVID is even less freedom and even more force, which throughout the entire history of the human race has always resulted in more poverty, disease, and suffering. Now, I can't, unfortunately, envision a scenario with a disease so deadly, so communicable, and so widespread that drastic measures like lockdowns would be necessary. This is not it. This is not even close. Not when you look objectively at the totality of the facts. The numbers I just mentioned are estimates, but unlike the model projections used to justify the lockdowns, these are based on actual reality. There's actual history here. There's actual data. Okay, the lockdowns were based on no real data, but on computer models that proved to be wildly inaccurate, unreliable, and ever-changing. This is the most amazing thing to me. The lockdown deaths have not even been considered. This information is nowhere to be found in any public discourse. It's right there in front of us, but we refuse to look. More to the point, we're not allowed to look. This poor guy, widely regarded scientist before he dared question the lockdowns, found himself muzzled immediately thereafter. When this interview was republished in other media outlets, this fact was missing, edited for clarity, so even the muzzling had been muzzled. He subsequently endorsed the lockdowns. Why was it hateful, ignorant, and dangerous for him to acknowledge facts? Why is it compassionate to care about people affected by one phenomenon but not the other, especially when the other one is far more deadly? Let me put this another way. Worldwide, about 1.35 million people are killed each year in traffic accidents. Same general range as COVID. Let's say we knew that next year the number of traffic deaths would quadruple to about 5.4 million. And we knew with certainty that these additional traffic deaths would be prevented by worldwide economic lockdowns. Would we shut down the economy of the entire world to prevent these additional traffic deaths? Would we? If, and it's a big if, the situation is different for COVID because of the horribly wrong predictions made early on. At some point, it became very obvious that COVID was not going to be another Spanish flu. Why are the lockdowns not now recognized for the colossal blunder that they were? The lockdown deaths have already started. COVID-19 will wane, but in the coming years, the lockdown deaths will become a tsunami. But if present trends hold, we'll be doing everything in our power not to notice. Prior to his muzzling, John Ioannidis called COVID-19 a once-in-a-century data fiasco. John Ioannidis was right. We will either learn from this experience or we won't. When the dust settles and the fear level recedes, there will either be a thoughtful, fact-based analysis of what really happened, or there won't. The outcome of that process has the potential to help us do better in the future or to dwarf the damage that we did here, because it will determine what we do the next time around, and there will most certainly be a next time around. Sociologists toss around the term existential threat, which means a threat to the existence of our species. And they usually use it in the context of war or famine or pandemic. Folks, extinction is not likely to be an overnight phenomenon. It won't be obvious or easily avoidable. We talk about this in the segment called The Rules. It will likely be, to our eyes, slow, gradual, and seemingly unstoppable, but in actuality, it will be, if it happens, a series of choices made by us on purpose that are counter to the rules of life on Earth. Choices just like the one we made with COVID-19. For Homo sapiens, commerce is life. Commerce is life. If we lose track of what keeps us alive, there's a very good chance we won't be alive. So let's stop obsessing over the worldometer, or maybe it's worldometer, I don't know. But if you can't, next time you're there, hit the icon in the upper left and scroll down. In doing this, you'll get a bit of context for the constant deluge of information we all get on COVID-19. We need some perspective, all of us, because it is not the velociraptor that we can see that we have to worry about. It's the one that we can't.
Clever girl.